1989 John Deere 285. I'm working on this Snowthrower snowblower. Check the pin comment for the timestamps. This is a long video because I'm going to show you how to pretty much take apart the whole snowblower. I went in thinking that I had bad shaft bearings, but it ended up being a couple more problems. So I'll show you how to get in here and remove the specialized locking collar in order to get the bearings off the shaft and then to remove the whole auger from the housing. I will also show how to take apart the rest of the snowblower assembly. For example, if you need to paint it or work on another component, I'll show you how to remove the pulley, and I'll show you how to put everything back together, including how to space the chain properly to make sure you don't end up with some chain rub. I'll also show you how to level the bucket and how to tension the belt. This snowblower has a serial number for 1989, and you can see it's got the chain drive on there. More about that in a second. And there was a later version that's got a pulley and a belt on this side, and it's my understanding that it's very similar to do the bearings and the locking collar and the shaft, and I think all those part numbers are even the same. So if you have the pulley on this side, it won't be identical, but it should be fairly similar. I wasn't planning on filming this job, but I got into it and I thought, oh, maybe it'll be helpful for some other people. So this is just mocked up right here. This key is going to be in. When you get in here, that screw is going to be down. But I want to show you what I know from the parts diagram. All I have for this disassembly is the parts diagram, but if you're familiar with these from installing them and whatnot, if you have one, you know that that pulley there is the belt pulley to the PTO. This lever back here, if you're going to be doing this job, go ahead and push this lever back. That's that tensioner lever. Push it back so you don't have any tension on the belt. And then to get the chain off, it's not too difficult to do. What you have to do is loosen these 4 screws. These were 10 millimeter. And then the jam nut that you would use to tighten it, this jam nut here, these 2 jam nuts and then this tensioning bolt. Loosen these 2 jam nuts, I think those were 13 millimeter, and then just pull this, give enough slack so this bolt's out of the way, and then you can move this in and out. And when you move it, you can see it's in now, and that's how you would tension it. So later we'll tension it, but pull it in enough and you'll be able to slip this chain off. Focus. And you slip the chain off. This is going to stay on there because this shaft, if I should mention that pulley there, that pulley is keyed onto a drive shaft that the sprocket is welded onto. So this is one piece. There's a drive shaft from that pulley to this sprocket, so you can't take off that little sprocket a la carte. And if you do pull this out, then you can get this plate off, but otherwise you can't get that plate off. I don't need to do any of that work, so I'm just going to leave it like this, kind of out of the way. So once you get to this point here with the sprocket, you'll undo this set screw. This was, I think I used a 10 millimeter wrench for that. That's got a square head on it, and your key is obviously going to be pushed in. I'm just mocking it up. That's why I didn't push it all the way in. I got lucky on this. It really wasn't too difficult to remove after I backed off this set screw. I soaked this with PB Blaster between the shaft and the sprocket, and I was able to get it off pretty easily. Now, your mileage may vary on that, as they say. If you're having trouble removing the sprocket, I would hit this with some heat. Hit this with some heat and then see if you can't pull it off that way. And so there you can see there's the keyway there in the shaft. Oops, for that key. And so the reason I'm doing all of this is because I've got a heck of a lot of wobble. This thing shakes like crazy, so I'm thinking I've got bearings out or bushings, hopefully bearings, because the bearings are cheaper and I have the bearings on hand. I just wanted to show that this is the back of the bearing, and so I started on the other side. That's where we'll head now. I've already removed this collar, but I've got it mocked up here to show you how to remove it, and I'll tell you what also I had to do. You do have to come up with a way to prevent the rotor from turning while you're doing this work, so there's already a hole there. I just went through that, as you can see, with a bolt, and then I've got a chain up. I just have that rack there to protect the flange on the chute so I don't bend it, and then that chain you can see is just looped around the frame, and that'll prevent the rotor from turning. So here is the deal on this specialized locking collar, which can be a lot of trouble if you don't know how it works. Here's the part numbers for the locking collar and the new bearing, and here they are. And so the first thing you'll notice with this is, look at that strange shape on that inner race. See how this part is way thicker than that part? So this is thicker opposite, and the same deal on this locking collar. It's way thick down here and way thin up there. This is called an eccentric locking collar, an eccentric inner bearing race. And the way that this works is, you use these on shafts like the snowblower shaft that only rotate in one direction. And so this rotation on the snowblower shaft is going to be downward as you're looking at it from the front. So it's counterclockwise on this side. So I've got this little arrow. As you're looking at it from the left, from the right, you're looking at it, it's going to be turning on that clockwise if you're looking at the sprocket where the chain is. And so the way that this setup works with these eccentric shapes is that this bearing, once it's on the shaft, it can move back and forth freely. This collar is what's going to lock it in place, because that eccentric shape, see that overlap there? You can, when you put this on, you can see you got to kind of turn it until it fits where it needs to be. And then when you go to tighten it, you tighten it in the direction of the shaft rotation. So in this case, this way. And what that does is you'll be able to use that difference in shape to lock the collar in place with respect to the race on the shaft. And then since it's locking in the direction of rotation, if you get any bearing creep, it's going to serve to tighten it instead of loosen it. So if this was installed correctly by the last person who was in here, this locking collar should have been tightened in the direction of rotation, which again on this side would be this way. And so when you go to loosen it, you're going to use this hole. Oops, the camera. You're going to use this hole here. There's no screw in that hole. That's just a punch hole. You're going to use that hole to knock it the opposite way to loosen it. So to loosen it, you're going to knock it the opposite way of rotation. In my case, this was actually installed locked the opposite direction. So I had to knock it the direction of rotation to get it free. It was a little bit tricky, but I'll tell you what I did here. But ideally, and what you first want to try, loosen this set screw, and then with a punch into that hole there, drive the punch opposite way of rotation to loosen it. So that's going to be the direction of rotation, opposite to loosen it, and then later when you go to install it, with it. So same as the direction of rotation to tighten it. Here's what I mean. All right, so you get your 1/8 inch Allen key, and this is all going to be covered in rust. It's going to be terrible. So you soak this with PV Blaster or some type of penetrating oil. If you're lucky like me, even though it will take a little while to get the penetrating oil, and it will come out. Others, they end up accidentally stripping this, or it's just so rusty you can't help but strip it. And if you cannot get this set screw out, you have to drill it out, because as you'll see, there is a mark on the shaft from this, and it's enough of interference that even with the collar, you're not going to be able to get it off. So you have to drill this set screw out, unfortunately, if it gets stuck. Then this punch hole here, you're going to, again, if this was installed correctly, you're going to knock on as we're looking at it on this left side, you're going to knock it opposite way of rotation. So it's going to be that way, clockwise, to knock this collar free. Just a few knocks, and it should kind of rotate enough that you'll be able to grab it and pull it out. So this is just going to be a mock-up, and then I'll show you what I actually ended up having to do. Let me turn. So there's the rotor is not going to move now. Let me get my foot in there too. And I'll grab the hammer. And I'm just getting in on that hole. And I'll just give it a couple whacks. See how it's already moving? I mean, it's not on there very tight right now, but all right. So see how it moved, and then you'll be able to pull this collar off. I should say also soak this with a bunch of PP Blaster and everything. And then you can see there's a mark there from that set screw. But what I actually had to do, since mine was installed the opposite way, so to visualize, so how did that go? Normally when you'd be putting it on, you put it on and you turn it until, there we go. So that's the direction. And then we go to install it. We're back in there and we're going to smack it this way. Well, mine was the opposite way. So someone had installed it the opposite way. And what I ended up doing, and after I figured out that something wasn't right, is, again, I had soaked this with PB Blaster, let it set for about 15-20 minutes, cleaned off the PB Blaster, and then I went in with the torch. I went in with the propane torch, and I heated this up, got it up to probably about 350 degrees or so, and then I grabbed the channel locks. And I went on it with the channel locks because I had to turn the direction with rotation. Now, again, that's not how it should have been, but that's how it was. So I went with the channel locks and I turned it. That's why it's marred up. And it wasn't too bad. I mean, the heat really helps. So if you find yourself in that situation, even if you think yours is installed correctly, but it's really, really tightly on there, heat it up, hit it with the torch, and hopefully that'll help you. So once you have that loosened, you can see, I'll use the Cobras, but this bearing, and obviously don't do this to the bearing if you're not replacing it. I am replacing, but you can turn this bearing freely on the shaft. See that? So that's how that locking collar works. It's a really ingenious design, but if you don't know that that's how it works, you'll never get this thing off. All right, we're on this side now, and I've already soaked this set screw, and I had it loosened already, but I'll go ahead and remove this set screw here, and I have not messed with this collar yet, so we'll see. There is something I did want to mention as a clue to look at on the collar, and as you can see here, this is a good sign, because you see where the deformation is? It's in the direction of rotation, so remember the rotation is going to be down. And so this looks like somebody was in here punching it this way because it's all deformed. So it looks like this one was installed correctly. So I will be able to punch it hopefully opposite way of direction, that way. So let's see. Okay, so it's moving. Alright, now I'm going to try grabbing it with the Cobra and see if I can just turn it some. There it goes. Okay, so hopefully both of yours have this this result where you turn it to loosen it, you're turning it against the rotation of the shaft, so it's going to be that way, and you won't have any trouble. But also look at the collar in the like I showed you in the little punch hole. If you see punch marks on both directions, which is what I saw on the other one, on the outer one, that means that you might be in for the torch like I was. But if you just see the one, then you might get lucky. You see, I've already got that loosened. All right, let's see how to get this shaft out. Now, I'm definitely not positive about this, but I think what I have to do next is, you see I already have these loosened. These were 13 millimeter. I think I have to take this plate off in order to get that bearing out, and then once I get the bearing out, I'll be able to get the key out, because you can see there's a keyway on this shaft, and I know from the parts diagram, and then you can also just figure intuitively that this part is keyed to the shaft, because this is the part that will always spin with the shaft, even when the shear bolt is broken. So that shear bolt is what allows the rotation to transmit from this, which is always going to rotate with the shaft because it's keyed to the shaft, to the rotor. So I know I have to remove this, so I think I'll go ahead and remove that shear bolt, and then maybe come out here, remove this plate, see if we can get to that key. Shear pin is out, and so the shaft will spin freely, and the auger is tied off here. I've been warned that it's pretty heavy, so I just got a bar across here. So next I'll go ahead and remove this fasteners for this plate and see what's going on behind there. 13 millimeter. And I think I got these mostly loosened. Yeah, I do. Okay, with those fasteners out, there's some play. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so what am I supposed to do now? Oh, this is interesting. That just pulls off. Okay. So this pulled off with the bearing in there. I guess I'll have to figure that out later. All right, so I'm gonna have to turn this. And I'm gonna have to get that key out now somehow. I think I'll go ahead at this point and remove this same part on the opposite side. Okay, over on this side, I've already got these loose. This last one. Okay, so that's the last one there. Let's see if the same thing happens here. I'm gonna kind of push it from, yeah. So I pushed it from inside with my other hand. And that'll just come off, looks like too. Let's see. That one might need a little, might need a little PV blaster on that to get that to move. Alright, let's see what the heck's going on the other side. Alright, I put some PV blaster in that keyway. I'm gonna see if I can reach in here, grab this key. Let the cobras. I don't know if this is gonna work. There we go. It's moving. Gotta pull this straight out. Alright, there we go. There we go. Alright. I noticed here, if I just give just a little whack with the deadbolt hammer on the end of the shaft, that it would move. So I'm just going to hit it a couple times and see if it could just move it enough on this side to clear it so I can pull it out this way. That's it. See how it's moving? I think that'll be more than enough. Okay, I'm thinking I might. That is through that hole there, and I got plenty of clearance over here. So I think I'll go ahead and just lower the auger down. Looks like I am low enough. Okay. I'll go ahead and take the chain off of it. Okay, let's see. Oh, ha! Duh, I gotta remove that. There's 3 of these. These were 13 millimeter, and one of them I didn't even have to remove because it was broken. So I'll have to do some repairs on this here, but that's alright. Now, I think I can get this auger out. Let's see. Yep. Oh. Okay, it's really not that heavy. Cool. Okay, so the shaft is, I saw that bearing set over on that side, so the shaft is kind of staying in place, but I'll be able to the auger is really not that heavy, so cool. Now the shaft I'll go ahead and pull out this way. And there's the shaft. This is that right side set that I was having trouble getting off. So just now, I just tapped it with the deadbolt hammer to get it back here. Then I'm going to really clean this shaft up here and lubricate it and then see if I can tap it off that way. Don't want to hit anything very hard, so just use something kind like this. Got it cleaned up, a little bit of lubricant on there, and I'll see if I can tap it off now. this is that collar. I can move that out of my way. There we go. There it is. And now, I wonder, this sounds terrible. I'm hoping that's what my problem was. Overall, the auger looks pretty good. I got some bends that I'm gonna have to work out, such as that there. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the new wear plate because this is real worn. You can see a little daylight through there. It's worn all the way through. So it's my understanding that the wear plate was added to the later models, but it will fit this one. I'll put the part number up for that. I'll go ahead and order that. And I am going to do the flapper modification that a lot of people do. That'll be coming up. Now the shaft is symmetrical as far as those keyways, and I'll get those cleaned up. I went ahead and scribed the end of this with an R because this is that right side, and that's you can tell there because remember that bearing was on the inside of the auger, so the gear was out, or the sprocket was out here, and there's the mark there from the set screw. So I'll go ahead and put it back in that same orientation when I do put it back in. Now for this sprocket and the roller chain. I counted 40 teeth on this sprocket, and I'll put up a part number for this. I think it's the original. I'll put up a part number for that set screw too. I did notice there's some wear on the back there, you can see, so this was rubbing, and I'm gonna have to make sure that that's spaced better. As for the chain here, you can see it is marked 40, and if we count it out, just these outer links, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, plus the clip there on that master link. I'll put up some part numbers for you that might be helpful with that. I did want to mention that you saw when I was banging the other bearing off the shaft how this fits in here, and it'll be like that, and yours might come out like this. To break this free, the one that wouldn't just come apart, I just put it back on the shaft like the other one was, and I just smacked it, not too hard, just pretty lightly with the deadbolt hammer, and then these discs or plates came apart. So, having a look at these bearings now, it seems that this was my problem. This bearing here, which is actually the right side bearing, so the bearing on the sprocket side, it's got some play here. I can pull it in and out, and it sounds terrible. You can see if you can hear that sandiness. Alright, so compare that to the other side, which also has a little bit of play, but not much. You can sort of see right there. This one sounds good. So compare that to the new one. Here's the new one. There is no play at all on this inner, moving this inner race, and it's just totally silent. Really nice sealed bearing. It was a little disappointing that I got this from John Deere and it's made in China, but I will do some research with the other parts to see if there's a Timken or a better bearing for you guys out there. The names on the bearings here, this is a Fafnir, if that's how you say that, RA100, and this is the one that I pulled out of there. The new one that I got from John Deere, inside race has a part number on there. Looks like that might be 205-16-AP. You can see it's marked China. Next, I'll remove this scraper here. I've already removed the nuts on the bottom side. These are 10mm. They might be hard to get on because, as you can see, those are all ground down. So the fasteners, the 4 that were on this side were all ground down. The 4 that were on this side weren't. And these are carriage bolts you can see here. And those, I've been told you're supposed to cut them, anything that's sticking out extra, but it looks like those were either cut or they were ground down. So the good surprise of this is that I just got this one on here to show. This just pops off, and it's two-sided. And the good news is this is a clean side, so I don't have to buy a new one of these. I'll put the part number up for that in case you do. I'll just turn this bad side towards the back. And when it comes time to put this back on, put it on. I am going to get new hardware. You can see I have some work to do for rust mitigation. I'm going to remove the shoes. I did make a reference line there. I don't know if I will need that, but I did it on both sides. You can see I got a little couple spots where I got a weld. We'll see how this cleans up. So I'll get this outside with a wire wheel and get to some rust work. There are the old shoes and the new shoes. I just put that hardware in there so I don't lose it. There's that part number. It's the same part number for either side. Check out this wear. Whoa. This is the left side, which was the side that was by far vibrating the most. And this was the right side. So I'm going to save these old shoes and see if I can't weld a piece of steel in there so that I'll have a backup pair. But these are the ones I'll put back on. Found another reason why I might have this wobble. Behind that shoe, you can see I already ground it down, but this weld is broken. And it's broken on both sides. Here's the same spot, but on the other side. You can see that's busted. And I've got the implement all the way down and locked out, and you can see I can easily move that. So don't know which one came first since it was behind the shoe, but I bet that's got a lot to do with that. A lot to do with that wiggle. Oh no, it's snowing. But our snowblower is still in multiple pieces in the garage, but it's okay because this is just going to be a little storm, so we don't have to worry. I'm going to weld this piece on here. This broke on either side on mine, and I also discovered some hairline cracks from the hole on this one, so I'm going to fill those in as well. So hopefully this will go well. I got a magnet on the back there. I'm just going to use my Harbor Freight titanium 125 flux core welder. Here is the chute, and you can see I got a little problem there. That's a broken weld, and that's probably from all that vibration. You can see they didn't do any welds there. There's a weld there, and right before that second weld, this is cracked clear across. See that? So I'm going to have to repair that and this. The other welds look good. This part on the back, this hinge, on mine, it looks fine. But I understand these often break. I'll put up a part number for that. This, you can see it's held in with some very wide rivets. I'm trying to straighten the vents here on the auger, and I've been pretty successful. Just a combination of using the torch and just banging it out with the sledgehammer. I have a couple pieces of board here, and then right there I've got a 2x4, and that is so that when I'm banging on it, I'll bang this direction, and that'll keep it from moving, make it a little bit easier to control. Just going to heat this up with the torch and then bang it out. Heat it up on both sides. So it's heat up some, and I'm just going to have at it with the sledgehammer here. It's going to be loud. Well, you can see it's quite a bit better. Got to clean it up a little bit, but it works. I think I got this pretty much banged out. There's a couple spots where I might try to do a repair. This spot right here, you can see that one was a tough one because it was actually split. So I pushed it back together. Obviously, it's still split, so I might try a weld on that and then grind that down. And then on this side here, kind of got a similar thing going on. That was folded over and broken in that one spot there. But it's got the flight, straightened out quite a bit. So I might work on that a little bit more. We'll see, but the others look pretty good. The other parts that I had to fix, this one here looked pretty bad, but the technique of just heating it up and banging it put it straight pretty well. I'm interested to cut this bearing open. This is the one that's real noisy, so I'm gonna use an angle grinder and see what's inside. I cut through the outer race on both sides, so let's see what we get here. Let's see if I can take that outer race off. Oh, look at that. Yeah. Let's see what's going on behind this other side, if I can pull this off. There we go. Change gloves so I can get a little finer touch here. There's the seal and the seal on the other side. Yeah, there's a lot of contamination in here. And there's that. Just to focus, stay focused. All right, so after closer inspection here, having taken this bearing apart, this was the real sandy one, and yeah, there is some dirt in there, that's for sure. One of the seals or both must have failed, but I don't see any huge issue other than the sandiness, which isn't good, but I don't think that would cause the wobble. So I am withdrawing my accusation against this bearing as being the cause of all this. I think it was probably the weld failed on one side, it failed on the other side, and it didn't help the bearings. But I don't think that these, me personally, just looking, I would expect to find like a cracked race here. I mean, I've checked out all the balls look good. This is supposed to be shaped like this ring. Well, one side has these features on it. So yeah, it's dirty and it's definitely contaminated, but I don't think it was, I don't think this is what caused, I don't think this was a first failure. Now, if I came in here and I found this race split across here, like sometimes you find, then I would likely, condemn this bearing for maybe causing a wobble that caused the welds to fail, but I don't see that here, so who knows? The mystery may never be known. Here's the repair on those broken welds. I sent a picture to my neighbor who's a retired welder, and I said, how would you fix this? And he said, TIG weld. So I took it over to his shop. We took the, he's about a quarter mile away, so I just drove the snowblower over there. We took the blower off in his shop, clamped it, and he put a nice TIG weld on there. Did some work on the inside as well, because we had some broken welds on the inside. He filled in that spot there where it had gone all the way through. I've already ground that down. And he repaired it also on the other side. So I think we're good as far as those main structural things. But now I'm going to go ahead and separate this to be able to get back in there and clean a little better and then get this thing painted. Okay, I was thinking that these in here might be 3/4 or 19 millimeter. They're not, they're 18 millimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those four. Okay, got the nuts off there, but those are still in place. The bolt's just holding it. I'm going to remove those little 10 millimeters. And then hopefully we'll be able to slip the belt off. I'm holding this up right now, but once you take these fasteners out, this is going to want to go ahead and move back. So this whole thing can just kind of pull out of our way. I can do that, undo that fastener over there that I just have in holding that shield, and we'll be able to pull that back. And then this here, it looks like all I got to do here is kind of tilt the snowblower back. I can pull these out. And I'm in pieces. Here's what I mean here. I just had this fastener in place, kind of holding the shield on, and this whole deal will pull out. So that drive shaft there is now separated, and I'll be able to get back in here and clean it up a little bit and paint back there a little more easily. Here's the auger, sitting up, getting ready to get a little bit of paint on it. I drilled 4 holes. Those are 1/4 inch holes that I drilled there for the little flapper modification that you'll see later that people do. I'm going to give that a shot. I have the bushings taped off and the shaft taped off. My idea is that I'll just be able to kind of spin it to paint it, but that'll probably end up being a disaster and it'll get wrapped up in the plastic and fall or something crazy like that. But we'll see how it works. You can see there I've got a little bit of that rust neutralizer stuff on the places where it was bare, and I did have to do a few repairs on this. I think I showed that earlier, where I had to do some little welds in places where the auger had to be banged back. My expectations are pretty low as far as painting because I'm not much of a painter, but I'm going to use this here. I have used this before, this Ultra Cover Rust-Oleum primer and this gloss protective enamel. Okay, there it is, primed up, and this does work. If you put the shaft in it and put on these horses, I put some pieces of wood here to push the plastic back, and same on the other side. Then if you just hold the shaft and you watch the other side so it's not moving, you can go ahead and spin this and you can get a look and make sure you haven't got any spots missed, or turn it in order to paint it. So that's just with the primer. I think I got pretty good coverage on the primer. That's a couple coats on there, so I'll let that set for a bit and then go back with the top coat. It's done. Lots of coats. I basically used that whole can of that Rust-Oleum enamel. I'm all right with how it came out. We'll see how it dries. So far it looks good. This did work quite well too, having the shaft in so you could spin it around, because there's a lot of spots where you're going to just miss them if you have it on the ground or anything like that. And this uses up a lot more paint than you might expect because it's got a big surface area. I also did that little piece there that's drying. So I've got the bucket, or the housing, whatever you want to call it, up on the wagon now. And this thing, if I get that focus, there we go. This thing doesn't weigh much. So I'm a woman, I didn't have any trouble getting it up on there. I think it weighs less than the auger. And it's got on the one side, it's got that little part. That's why it's sitting on there crooked. But this position I think is a good one for going ahead and doing the inside. So I'll do the primer and the top coating on the inside of the bucket. Then I'll take it off and do all the outside. I'll also do the bottom while I have it like this. You can see that I just decided to grind that rust off instead of doing a treatment on it, since I'd have to wait 24 hours after a treatment. So I just use one of these. That's a real old disc there. But even with that old disc, it only took a couple minutes to work that clean. So I'll finish that up. There it is. I'm going to prime this now. I'm going to leave it in this position, and I did shoot it out with compressed air because I had a bit of dust in there. I'm going to use Rust-Oleum clean metal primer. I'm using white since I am going to go back over it in yellow, and we'll see how this comes out. There's the first light layer of primer. You can see this was painted before. There's kind of like those marks there. Not sure what that's all about, but yeah, I was going to, as I started doing this, I said, maybe I should put it on its side. Then I realized, no, that's definitely not going to work because I'm going to need 2 cans of this. This is what I'm going to use. And I only got 1 can, but after that experience right now on the auger, this is going to take 2 cans. There's the first couple light coats. I just closed the door. I had the door open for ventilation, but I'm closing it because it's starting to get a little cold outside. I got 2 space heaters running to try to keep myself above about 50-60 degrees in here. So far so good, but this paint seems to be going on pretty well. I'm all pleased with it so far. It's going to need a few more coats. Here we are on maybe about coat 3 or 4, and it seems to be going quite well. These are not ideal painting conditions. As you can see, it's kind of going between about 55 and 60. Cooled down pretty quick when I open that door because it's in the 40s outside. But it does seem to be going on pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with it so far. You will use a lot of it though, because I'm probably going to use pretty much the whole can just on this. I just finished the final coat here. I'm pleased with this paint. Just a couple little tips. I always wear a respirator when spray painting, but especially this shape. All this paint's going to end up right back in your face, so I recommend to wear a respirator. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. Hopefully the rest of the paint job goes as well, because I still have quite a few pieces, as you can see. To get ready to paint these other parts, I'm cleaning off the rust just with some sandpaper and roughing up all of the paint with, I think I got 180. Finally getting ready to paint the housing and the other parts that are remaining. You can see how I've kind of got it balanced like that. Piece of wood in there. The inside's dry. It's been drying for a few hours while I did this prep. I've got the labels covered up. I've got the chute covered just because I've already painted in there. And I'm going to go ahead and prime this. I did rough it up with the sandpaper, and hopefully this will go all right. There's a coat of primer on the outside of the housing, and I'm also doing these parts over here. And the painting is done on the housing. You can see I took the tape off of the labels, stickers, so you can see that. Nice finish on there, and I'm pleased with this paint. These guys here as well. I've got the housing on its back because next I'll put on that scraper. And again, I was able to reuse mine just by turning it around, and the wear plate. I'm going to use a slightly longer bolt here, carriage bolt, for these bottom ones, for the plate since it's going through the plate. The plate is on there, and the scraper bar. I'm going to grind these down, any parts that are sticking out. And right now I'm also going to put the wheels on. I'm going to put it in this spot here and that spot there so I can wheel it around to install it. I ended up cutting these fasteners instead of grinding them. And I just used an angle grinder with a cut-off disc, and it seemed to work pretty well. Them little bits are pretty hot when they come flying off though, so be careful. One more thing I'll do before I flip it over is I'll go ahead and put the shoes on. And that was these fasteners here, and these are 13mm. I'm just going hand tight on these shoes for now, with them all the way as low as they can be, because I have to make some adjustments on this later. Okay, shoes on, scraper on, wheels on, wear plate in. So I can go ahead and flip this now to get it installed. And I found that it seems to work best if you just reach in right where the shoe is. And then you can reach your hand around the back and pick it right up. I'm getting set up to put this back together, and I'm laying out all my hardware. As far as the hardware goes, remember you got these 18mm nuts and bolts. Those are going to go in those holes there. And this bracket thing, that's going to be on this side. Also the pulley here and the drive shaft, those little 10mm bolts and nuts, I think those were carriage bolts and nuts. Those are the ones there and there and there. That one there with the guide on it, I'm going to put that on there to hold this shield in place, but we'll have to take it out obviously before we finish the job, because that ends up going on the outside of the chain case housing. The belt routing. Okay, so this is important. Under here, make sure that you've got your belt routed. As you can see, this is the part that's going to go over around the PTO, so I just have it looped over the stirrups. But you want the belt to go around that one like that, all right? Then it's going this way. We'll get back to that in a second. And then it's going to be same deal in the guides there. This blue piece of tape is on, this is the belt coming from this pulley here. All right, that's to remind me that this is going to go on the bottom. So when we route it around the pulley, this is going to go on the bottom, around the top. So like that part will be the part that goes under the idler, okay? And, oh yes, another thing I'll do now. This here, that's that tensioner bolt with the jam nut. I'm just going to install that in there since we have room now. This is how you want to install this tensioning bolt. It just is the temporary install, because we'll make an adjustment on this later when we tension the chain. Put the nut down close to the head of the bolt here. Run it through like that, and then put this other nut on the other side. Doesn't really matter where you put it now, because we will be making an adjustment, but that's how that goes on there. Alright, I think to get this installed, I'm going to slip this block under the scraper around the front, and that'll bring that up a little bit so it'll line better. So I'll just lift this up, slip that block under there, and might even move it back a little like that. Okay, so then this part will be up here like so, and I'll just set that like that for the moment. Alright, with the belt, I got the blue tape. I don't know if you can see it, but the blue tape side is this side. Let me go ahead and bring it out so you can see it. Hopefully you can see the blue tape. I'll grab the pulley, and the blue tape's going to be on the bottom. Then that's going to go around the idler and tucked in there. Make sure you can get it tucked in there. And I'm just grabbing, you probably can't see, but I'm just taking up some of the slack where it would be around the PTO. I think I'll just go ahead and bring this over here and get it kind of lined up with those little 10mm ones. So that would be like that. Okay, yeah. I'll put a couple of these in. Okay, now we'll go on this side, just so it's not bouncing around. I'm just going to stick this fastener through the hole. We're going to have to take this off again, well, after we put the chain on, but this way it's not scraping and whatnot. So I can put these big fasteners in. Just get them loose. What was like. To line that up a little better. There it goes. Okay. So yeah, you do have to tilt the snowblower some if it's not lining up here. There it is. Okay. Before I continue, I'm going to double check that I didn't make a mistake here. Alright, the belt routing is good and everything looks good except for one mistake I made. When I put the carriage bolts in, I put it in this way, so with the bolt going in on the top and the nut in the back. Don't do that because remember we have to use these to tension the chain. So do it with the bolt coming up in the bottom and then the nut on the top. That way you can just get a wrench on it when it comes time to tension it. So I'm just going to put these on loose right now. Once you have your belt routing correct, that blue tape again is on the bottom side of the pulley over the top. It goes on the bottom of the idler and then through that little guide there. Once you have that ascertained as good, we can go ahead and tighten these fasteners. On these 4 18mm fasteners, I noticed that even though the holes aren't slotted, there's enough of a difference between this piece and that piece, and same on the other side, that if the bucket is not in just the right spot, when you have these bolts in here loose, they'll get pinched enough, kind of wedged, that you won't be able to move them. Maybe all of them, maybe one of them, maybe two of them if it's not in the right spot. So I tried taking the wheels off in the front. That didn't make a difference. So I put a couple pieces of wood under the scraper up there on the bucket. And now I've got every one of these where I can move it loosely. I know that they're not going to be going in crooked, and I'm not going to strip the threads. This also is a type of locking nut. You can see that shape on there to indicate it's a locking nut. Got that all hooked up together, so I'm going to go ahead, before I put the auger on, and slide this into position and get it hooked onto the 285. So you probably know how to do this if you've already hooked this thing up before. I'm just going to slide it in here. Before you try to install the snowblower, make sure you've got the implement lock all the way down and locked. And then make sure that you've got your spring assist turned counterclockwise a whole bunch. You can see there on the threading. I've already done that because when I removed it. You want to push it under the tractor so that this part here, because this is going to loop around a pin and you can lock it like that on each side. That's the pin you're going to lock it on. You can see where it goes over to the other side. Then the stirrups, that stirrup there on the right side, it's going to go in a pin through that hole, and then the same thing on this side. You won't really be able to see it, but you can do it by feel. Right here is a hole, and after you have this looped up, you'll be able to push this up and loop it through. So I just lifted it up, and so that's lined up there, and this will flip right over. You can do the same thing on the other side when you go over there, or while you're on this side, you can go ahead and get this lined up. Lift this stirrup through that hole. See that there, if I can get that to focus. See that hole? I'm just going to line it up and stick the pin through in the cotter key. This is the pin and the cotter key for those stirrups. There's the pin there with the cotter key in. Put the pin in this way, in that direction, because it's easier to get the cotter key in. Okay, now I'll loop the belt around the PTO. Make sure it doesn't come off the guides of those other ones, and I'm just reaching around just like that, okay? Make sure it's on there. That's good. Now we'll move to the other side. Okay, now I'm on the right side, and same deal. You want to get this looped over here. If you find that this won't easily go on, just go to the front of the bucket and just kind of wiggle it around until you have it lined up here. And also the same deal under here. Let the stirrup, or the yoke, whatever you want to call it. Want to get that pin in there, just like that. Hopefully you can see that. And then while we're under here, go ahead and tension the belt. So you want to push that all the way up like that. The belt is tensioned. I'm going to reach around and grab it, make sure it's tensioned. That looks good. Now back here, I'm going to turn this clockwise to bring this in to get a little bit more spring assist. We don't have anything except this on this tractor. We don't have any of the lift assist or anything like that. So it takes quite a few turns. If you have those other options, you might not have to turn it so many times. So for our case, I did about 20 turns there, and I can easily move this, but I haven't got the rotor in, so there's lockout down. Pull it up. I can pull it up. I'll probably have to make another adjustment after we get the rotor in. Then don't forget to take the wheels from the rolling position and put them both on that long stud there. If you remove this piece here like I did to paint it, in my case, this part here fits through that hole, so all I had to do was pull it that way. If that doesn't work for yours for some reason, there's a set screw on that shaft, and then you can pull the shaft back, take the gear out, and pull it out that way. And those are the fasteners there: carriage bolt, a washer, and a nut. The handle just connects like this. Then you go in with that cutter key. This stabilizer bar here goes one side on this stud and the other side through a hole over here in the frame. And I'll show you, if it doesn't line up quite right, you can just kind of give it a little persuasion. So I'll put that on there. That'll have a cutter key on it eventually. And then I'm just going to kind of move the bucket until this will align, and I get it through there. There it is. And then cutter keys on each side. And now to get the auger back in the housing. You can see I've got the auger laid out here. I have the shaft in place. I cleaned the shaft up. I did check out the bushings. The bushings are good. I've got the auger in the right orientation on this model, which has the chain drive on the right side from the perspective of the operator. The shear plate and the shear bolt is on the left side. So you'll remember that from when we took it out. Now I believe if you have a model which has the belt drive on this side, that the shear plate's on the opposite side. So however you remove the auger, make sure that you put it back on the same way. Let's take a closer look at the left side. So I got this keyway cleaned up really nice, and you can see there's that little mark from the set screw. So this is put in I put the shaft in the same way that we took it out, but it's symmetrical, so you could do it the other side if you'd like. So I have the plate on that side and the shaft pushed in almost all the way. Over on this side, I don't have anything. You can see there's that mark from that set screw on this side. Just kind of grab it. You can see I've got these towels in there just so it doesn't hang up so much. Let's see, I'm going to put my arm in the middle of this. Okay, so it's on the one side. Let's see if I can get it on the other side. Almost. I'm going to have to pull the shaft through a little bit this way. There we go. Okay, I think I got it. Okay. I've got the auger hanging now. I just have the horses in a better spot than I did before. Let's take a closer look here on this right side. You can see I had to come back and clean this up a bit more. This shaft. The reason is because when I slipped this bearing on, I was getting a little bit of resistance. You don't want to get any resistance. You want this to be able to go on real nicely. So clean the shaft up. Don't take any edge off of the keyway because you want your key to be tight. But get that cleaned up. There's the mark from the previous collar, and remember that collar we had to reach that from the inside here. So I might regret this, but I was thinking that what I could do is just kind of use that as a guide. So I took the set screw out there. Right there, I took the set screw out so that I'll be able to look for that hole. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and put the bearing on. So remember how these go on. It's going to go on like this. And this one's going to go on like this. And I'm going to push this back in and hold this and just kind of get that sort of, not all the way in place, but sort of in place. And then I'm going to take one of these and slip it on. Oh darn it, I got to take this out first, because this one has to go like this, and then the bearing. Okay, so let me do that again. And then I'm just going to kind of use these as a guide. I'm not going to put the other one on. I might, I don't know. I might have to see how this goes. I don't want these flange housing things. I don't want them to determine the position of the bearing. I want the collar to determine the position of the bearing. So I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to put all these fasteners in just hand tight. Okay, so it took a little finagling, but looks like that technique works. I can see that old set screw mark there. Right now I know that I'm pretty much in the same spot. When I knock it, I'll be down a little bit further. You won't be able to see any marks at all. But this tells me that I'm in about the right spot this way. I don't have too little of the shaft sticking out on this side or too much. And I'm going to go ahead and put this other housing on and then get the fasteners back in finger tight. As far as this protrusion here of the shaft on the chain drive side, I'm going to go right to the back of the bearing, and you'll see it's at 1.5 inches. See there on the tape? So I wouldn't go too much further out than this, because then you run the risk of running into the chain case cover. It can't be a whole lot further in though, because you want to have some wiggle room for when it comes time to put the sprocket on. You need to be able to align this sprocket plane with this sprocket plane. So you're going to run the chain. You don't want to have it out of alignment, so you want to be able to have a little bit of wiggle room here. So just keep that in mind. So unless there's something I'm overlooking, I can't figure out any other way to get the key in except for the reverse way. So I guess I'll go ahead now and put that shear bolt back in. That was this here. And don't use any other bolt except the shear bolt, because it's a weak type of steel that's intended to break. And this was a 7/16. I don't often use this little tiny gearless ratchet, but in jobs like this thing really comes correct. It's by Titan. I'll put the part number in. It's a tiny little thing. In 0 degree, to reverse it, you actually push it through like that. Here's a note about the keys. I'll put up the part number for the John Deere key. I bought the John Deere key because I wanted to get the standard length. I noticed that this was a homemade key when I took it out, because it was actually a little bit angled. I cleaned it up some, but it was obviously cut on either side from keystock. So I wanted to know what the true length was, and you can see the John Deere is a little bit shorter. I'm actually going to reuse this one because it's still in spec on the width, and I like the extra length just to have something to grab onto. However, you can't have it too long because it'll run into the back of the bearing after install. Okay, hopefully from that angle you'll be able to see that the key is just the length of this plate, so it won't, when this John Deere key is installed, it won't stick out any. That's why I'm going to use this, because I found it convenient that a little bit did stick out for me to grab when I was doing the disassembly. But again, it can't stick out too far, otherwise it's going to rub into the back of the bearing. So for comparison there, you can see that the John Deere is 0.88 inches long, and this homemade one, after I got it a little bit cleaned up, is 0.9875. And I don't think you could go much longer than that without running the risk of smashing into that bearing. As far as width, it's a 1/4 inch. So you can get some 1/4 inch key stock and make your own. That's the new key there. And see, oops, my glove's pinched. 1/4 inch. And this I measured the old key. I'll reuse it because it's still within spec. Make sure you've got the shaft aligned with the slot on that plate. I'm gonna get this in now. I have a feeling I'm gonna have to give it a little encouragement. It fits in okay there. I can push it by hand a little bit. Everything's pretty cold right now. It's very, very cold in this garage. Just use something that's not going to deform it. I'm going to just lightly tap the other side of this. There it goes. Alright. Looks like that's all the way in. So the key is in there, and I'll be sure to check the clearance on the bearing. And on this side, remember you want to put this piece in first. That's that shape. And the collar's on the outside if you remember. So this is going to go on this way, not this way, this way. Let's see if we can get that sort of lined up in there. Okay. And then I'll just put this on and put the fasteners in hand tight. A little bit difficult to record, but I can see that the key is not touching that bearing. I need to make a minor adjustment over here on this side. The adjustment is that where I have the inner race right now, when I put the collar on, you just kind of turn it, and you're going to turn it in the direction of rotation until it'll find the spot where it wants to seat, and there it is there. The set screw is here, and there's the keyway, so there's a chance that if I tighten it right here, I'm not going to be able to get it past the keyway, which would negate the purpose of having the set screw. So what I'll do is I'll just turn the inner race, something like that, so that I can get a better spot, like let's say something like that. I might even turn a little bit more to make it convenient for myself. So I'm just grabbing this part and turning it, and so when you put the collar on, you're going to put it on until it'll find its spot, turn it in the direction of rotation, and this looks pretty convenient for me here. We'll tighten the collars now. Before doing that, just double check with your chain case cover here that you're not going to be touching this part here with the shaft. So just kind of mock it up. So as before, I just have a bolt going through that big hole. Up over, I got a rack to protect the flange, and then that is looped around the frame there. I'm going to start with the collar here on the right hand side. I'll just kind of grab it by hand and see how close it is. It should be fairly tight on there now. Now let's get this collar locked in. You can see I just put that set screw back in. I had that out so that I could look through the hole. As mentioned a few times in the video, to tighten this, we're going to punch it, turn this collar in the direction of the rotation of the shaft, which is going to be downward as we're looking at it from head on. So if you can get a pin wrench in there, you might try that. I'm just going to go ahead and use a punch. And it is already tight. I turned it. You know, you put it on like I already showed, so it's properly grooved into the spots on the race, that inner race, and then turn it by hand till you get to the point. So if you keep an eye on that set screw, as I knock it, it should turn a little bit. Camera's like right in my way. See how it's moving? I might do it a couple more times. And that's probably good. Let's see if we get any more. Yep, I think that's good. I'm happy with where the collar is now, so I'll go ahead and turn the set screw in. The set screw just got to the point now where it's getting a little harder to turn. And what I've read online that people do is they kind of gauge the twist of the key to get an idea of the torque that they're at. That's where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to do it too crazy. That'll work. I'll do the other side now. Same deal. Just make sure that your set screw is not going to end up right in the keyway. And put this on. Turn the race if you have to get it in a good spot for access. So put this on. Here we go. Turn it in the direction of rotation of the shaft. Alright, it's catching there. Okay, I think that's alright. And I'll fasten on that set screw. The set screw is just to the point now where it's starting to resist. So there's not even a quarter turn. You can already see that the tool is wanting to bend. So I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to strip anything. I think that'll do it. Now I'll tighten up these three 13mm. And as I mentioned, I'm not positive that this was the right sequence of steps that I did. My concern was, since I didn't already have the flanges pressed really carefully onto that outer race of the bearing, I didn't want there to be any walk that ended up that would be kind of crooked. So that's why I locked the inner race to the shaft with the collar first before tightening these down. If you happen to know, leave a comment because it would be helpful. You are looking down the chute, and here's my little flapper modification thing that I made that I'll just tell you about in a second. I had already drilled those holes. I mentioned that before. The flapper, people use different things. I'm using a snowblower blade from a Toro. Also, people use baler belt, and that works too, apparently. This shape here is to clear the carriage bolt. So once you have it cut down roughly to the right size, you want to put it on this side so you can see the fins right here, because this is the side that as it goes around, so pretend it's coming up, it's going to scoop the snow, as opposed to putting it on this side. You don't want to put it on that side. After I have that shape there, and to cut this, I just actually heated up the end of a razor blade to get that shape to cut through here. This is like a 2-ply. It's got some type of reinforcement in the middle there. And so once you have that shape, then you want to push it up against, I'll do it the way it rotates. So it's going to catch, because there's going to be some part that'll be the highest part. So find where it is. For me, it was like somewhere around here. So I just moved it back barely until it would clear. So I can go, see it's barely catching there. Just did this a bunch of times until I had it right, and I was confident in the spacing. Then I held onto this real tight, and I brought it around the front to use the holes in the auger to drill these holes. So you can either use those holes to make a mark and cut your material. I just clamped this. Once I had it in the right spot, I clamped it onto the rotor, and I used the drill to go through the holes, just use the holes as a guide. And now that I have this all ready, I'm going to use some stainless steel fasteners, a couple fender washers on this side, and then regular washers on the other side to hold this in place. So there it is installed. I got the larger fender washers on the other side, you can see there. It's not that much of a difference. You can see it's just barely sticking out, but I also have the wear plate on. So if you don't have the wear plate, that's going to come out a bit more to take up the gap. We'll see how well this works. Supposedly this will help prevent the chute from clogging, which is the main reason that I'm doing this. And with both of them on, I can spin it and see that it's not interfering with it. So I'll be good to go like this, hopefully. Next, we could put that piece in there. And those fasteners were the 13mm. As you can see, there's a locking washer and a nut. And then on this side, I came back with some larger fender washers because I was having trouble with this kind of splitting up here. In my case, the flapper does not interfere with the shield at all. But if yours does, I would just grab it and give it a good tug back until it doesn't interfere anymore. Looks like I got to do a little backtracking because I just noticed that there is play right here on this sprocket. So it doesn't do much good to align anything to this sprocket if it's just going to move back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out and look at that pulley. I got the belt slipped off the PTO, and I'll slip that off of the pulley when I lift it up. It looks like if I just remove these 4 fasteners, I'll be able to lift this out. I remember putting this on that it wanted to kind of fall as soon as you remove those fasteners, so I'll have to put my hand under it. I had to take that one out because I had that holding up the shield, and that little shield part's going to come out with it. So I got those fasteners out, and yeah, it looks like I can just lift this up, slip this belt off, and backtrack. And remember, that's going to be on the top, so I guess I'll just leave it over there. So remember, there's that little guide that's got to slip out from. Let's see if I can get this thing out. Hopefully. Oh, good. Alright, so what I'm talking about that I see and that I don't like is this here. And on this pulley side, we can see where that's going on. So, looks like we got a set screw. Let's see what's in there. I'll put up the size. I think this was a 5/16. That's off, and this is real easy to remove. Oh, look at there. There's quite a few marks on that key. And looks like this is, oh, this is a Woodruff key. I think I was expecting some Woodruff keys earlier in the video, but they all ended up being square keys. That half circle shape is a Woodruff key. So if I press this, that would drive the sprocket out the other end. I don't need to do that. This is all going to be filled up with grease because this zerk right here, that's where you fill it up with grease. So I don't need to remove that for any reason because it's going to get messy if I do. So let's see here what's going on. Let's put this key back in and just kind of mock it up real quick. Oh, that's the wrong way. That would be going this way where that set screw is. Let's see. I might regret this because I might have to come back in here and do this all over again, but I think what I'm going to do is I'll push in on this sprocket on this side because grease comes out of both of these ends, so the surfaces will be greased. You can see the grease there. I think what I'm going to do is pretty much take it all up. I think I'll turn this key around so that I've got kind of a fresh side for the set screw. So I've got my hand pushing in the sprocket on the other side so that the drive shaft's held this way, and then I'll fasten this, if it wants to stay, I'll fasten this set screw. Maybe this will work, or I might have to come back in and adjust this again. I tighten that set screw down and it's just got, you can hear that, just a hair. So if we look on this side, this is obviously the side I'm worried about for alignment. The tiny little bit of movement, it's not rubbing, and again this will be greased because grease comes out of both sides of this kind of shaft cover, drive shaft, whatever you want to call this part. This part obviously is stationary and the shaft is moving inside of it. Got to keep it well lubricated. So let's see if this works. And then I'm going to have to get the belt on the bottom side. Oh yeah, I remember putting this on earlier. This was a pain. Gotta get a clamp. Okay. A little extra hand there with the clamp. And then I'll get these 4 fasteners in. Not tight, because you still gotta make the tension adjustments. I don't know why I did that earlier. I was looking at it upside down. This doesn't go there. Of course, this is an idler. This goes here. So the one that's coming over the top goes there like that. So it should be like that. The part of the belt that's on the bottom is coming from the left side pulley, as we did before. Then it goes around here and then over the top, under the idler, above the guide, and back towards the rear pulleys. I just used the grease gun to add some grease in here until I saw some grease coming out at either end. There it is there. You can see I wiped that part. I'll wipe the excess off. And you know, it's interesting because when I took this thing apart, when I was doing my paint prep, this whole area was covered with grease. All the way up it was covering all these labels, and that makes sense if there's that big gap. I took this whole thing apart to inspect it, thinking that I had some kind of problem with the shaft. But as you can see now, you don't have to remove this to clear that gap because all we did was loosen that set screw and pull the pulley in. So that's an easy way to do this without removing the whole thing. So that was a little backtrack there, and another backtrack. I had to take everything off. I actually had filmed it, set this whole thing up, putting the sprocket on, putting the chain on, tensioning it, and then I was turning my rotor and I realized, what the heck is going on? I got a real tight spot on my chain on the tension side at only at a certain point on the rotation. So I got on my calipers and I measured the old chain, and I should have done that in the first place because my old chain is out of spec. The old chain is too worn. To show you how dramatic the difference can be, this is my new chain. I've got this already cut about a 10-foot length. On Amazon, it was only about 20 bucks for 10 foot. And this is the new chain on the bottom. It's a size 40 chain. It's the same as this. This is the same number of components in both of these chains, but as you'll see, I've got them lined up pretty much at the end there. As we go towards the end, you'll see that wear, the slack and the rollers on the old chain allows that old chain to be too long. So see that difference there at the end? This is the same number of components, but this chain is worn out, so there's slack. And that slack allows that to be too long. And again, it tends to be uneven. And so even when if you have a worn out chain and you've got everything on here and you've got it tensioned properly, if you've got the sprockets in plane, you're going to get weird effects where the chain's going to be tighter it was extremely tight. In fact, it would be tight and then loose and tight and then loose. So hopefully this will be the solution to that problem. Here's what I mean. Here is the old chain. Let's see if I can show this to you here. Watch the dislocation here. I just push, see that? See that there? Oops. So this pin here is able to move too much inside the roller. And so here's another example. That one's pretty bad. Yeah. Let's check here. A little less bad. Still bad there. A little less bad though. But that accumulates, all that wear accumulates, and then you end up out of spec. And let's compare that to the new chain. I try to compress it, and there's no movement. I'm pushing on it pretty hard. And oops, there's no movement because this isn't worn out yet. Here's the chain that I got from Amazon. It says P&G bearings. Number 40 chain, 10 foot, and it comes with 2 master links. I'm only going to need the one. Got the new chain soaking in some grease, and you can see that spray. It kind of looks dirty, new, but I'm using this here. We'll see if that ends up working. Let's get this sprocket back on. Make sure that you have the tensioning bolt and then those 4 10mm fasteners for that drive shaft all loosened so that you can move the drive shaft forward. This also might interfere. Make sure this isn't getting in your way. That's slotted in the back. You want to be able to move this drive shaft sprocket as much this way so we can get the chain on. Here is the sprocket. I'm going to reuse mine. This looks good. I did clean it up in here. Just make sure it's nice and smooth. Same deal here. Make sure the shaft is smooth. Don't take off any edge to the keyway. You want that keyway to remain nice and sharp. If you do have to clean this up like I did, and I got the set screw in place there, I'm going to reuse that. I've been calling this set screw a 10mm, but it's now apparent to me that it's a 3/8, so use a 3/8 on it, not a 10mm. I've got a new key here, and I'm just going to put everything together loosely, so it's just going to be like this. I might tighten this down just a tad bit. Actually, yeah, maybe a little bit more. I'll probably leave it about like that. Let's see if I can get the new chain on without having to undo my master link. Let's see, maybe I'll get lucky. Yep, looks like I might just be able to get it. There we go. All right. If you remember, this is our drive gear, right? Because that's from the pulley, that's to the PTO. And this is turning clockwise. This turning clockwise is pulling this chain here. That's the tension side of the chain. That's pulling this clockwise as well. So the rotor's going down and shooting snow out the top. So this is going to be our tension side. This is going to be our slack side. So if there's any, like that jump that I just did right there, if there's any room to grab up some tension, some slack I mean, make sure that you grab up the slack on the tension side. Also, I should have mentioned, make sure that you've got your master link facing out. There's mine right there. You want this facing out because it, in case you have to access it, but also it's quite a bit thicker, and if you run out of clearance here, that'll rub against here even when the rest of the chain is not. So have it facing out. Okay, so remember, pulling this back is going to tension the chain. But the other thing to remember, and I did slip that belt off there so we could turn it, is you want to get this drive shaft about equidistant there and there as best as you can, so that this the face of this sprocket is not crazy like that or crazy like that. You want it pretty much straight, because or you know, I should say kind of parallel to the direction of travel, because you want to use this as a reference to line this sprocket up in playing with this. So this is where it can get kind of like you change one thing and then you got to change another, then you change one thing, you got to change another. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get this about equidistant here and here, okay, without messing with the tensioner bolt just yet. while still having building up some tension on the chain here, as you can see. Then I want to check this face and use it as a reference to align this sprocket with that face. Where it gets a little tricky is you run out of clearance back here. So again, you just have to keep making adjustments until you've got it just right for your particular snowblower. Alright, so a little fiddling around here, and this is just loosely on here. I just did that by hand. These are tightened just a little bit, and I'm getting pretty close here. So what I'm going to do next is try to get this sprocket aligned in plane with this one. Like I said, I have to watch the clearance back there and for chain rub here. So if it's a little bit off to prevent chain rub, then it's just going to have to be how it is. But I'm going to try to get it as close as I can. You'll be able to see this in person better than anything I can show you. I'm using my 2 points for the line here. So let's say here and here, and this is just cantilevered out, and you can see it's just scraping the face right here. And the other way to do it would be to use this, and you can see it's actually just a hair here. So I could go in a little bit more. I'm not going to though, because this starts to get real tight back here. I start getting really close, the chain starts getting really close there. So make sure that you've got clearance on your chain between all of these pieces, but try to get these pretty much in line. That doesn't have to be perfect, but consider all the factors and do the best you can. So I've got it where I want it. I brought this around up to the top, and the key here, I'm just going to push that key not quite all the way in, because I like to have a little bit to grab onto. I considered using a longer key in that, but I decided to just keep with this one. I'll go there, and now I'm going to tighten this 3/8 set screw. I'm not going to tighten it crazy tight. I will do it tight, but the crazy tight will come after we get our tensioning done down here. I want that tight enough that this sprocket's not going to move when we tension it here. So that's where we'll move next. So up here, you're going to need your full collection of 13mm wrenches. If you don't have wrenches for these fasteners, get a different fastener for the wrenches that you do have instead of buying wrenches if you got a bunch of 1/2-inch wrenches, for example. So what we're going to do here is push this tensioner bolt out such that we can get this drive shaft moved back. And then down here, I'm not going to be able to show you, but I'm touching the bottom of the chain on the tension side. The only spec I have is for the tension side, and that spec is 1/8 to 1/4 inch, so pretty tight. So what I'm going to do is use my 13s to get in here and hold these. I'll try to kind of show you what I mean. Okay, you see I've got that. I've got one 13mm there on that jam nut, and then with the other 13 here, and I've got that loose. You see there's slack back there. Alright, so I'm going to turn this. You'll feel it tighten as I'm turning this way towards the, well, that's, as you're looking at it this way, that's going to be clockwise, but it's also towards the pulley. That's going to tighten the chain. And if I do that too much and I need to back it off, I'm going to turn it this way, and that's going to loosen the chain. So I'm going for fairly tight, not super tight, but tight enough. And then I'll stop here. I'm going to keep that 13mm on just because it's a real pain to get all these 13s on. And I'll pull the camera back here. Oops, sorry, and give you a little idea. That is way too tight. That's super duper tight. It will still spin well though. If I turn it, it's spinning well. I'm not getting any extra tight spots. So then I'll come up here, turn this towards myself here while I'm holding that, and then come back here, and you can see I've got more slack. Turn it again. It's better to turn it at the pulley, but I just can't reach the pulley right now. Alright, so you're going to do that until you've got on this side, on the tension side, you've got 1/8 to 1/4 inch deflection. Now, I know that that's not typically where deflection is measured on chains. I'm more familiar with deflection on the slack side, but that's the only spec I have, so use your good discretion. As I mentioned, the only spec I have on this is from the owner's manual, and it's showing on the tension side, and it's saying 1/8 to 1/4 inch. That's just kind of bizarre to me. I'm more familiar with measuring on the slack side. So typically you want to do 2 to 4% of the center to center distance. So I measured this. This is about 11 3/8, which will give us 2 to 4% range here of a little under 1/4 to a little under 1/2 inch. I've got this marked on here. Not super precise, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to be in a range. So I'm just going to put the straight edge sprocket to sprocket and go mid-span, which looks like is about here. And I'm just going to look for that deflection. You can see I got it there. Alright, so I'm going to call this good. Here's what it looks like on the slack side. Here's what it looks like, oops, on the tension side. I did have to move this thing to be able to get my little gauge in there. I could put this back for the moment, even though I'm going to have to take this off to put the cover back on. Once you're satisfied, before you turn this down on the set screw, just make sure you've got clearance all the way around, and any place where you had signs that you were rubbing, like where the paint is rubbed off, down there in this case, and up here as well. Just make sure you've got clearance on all of those places. Once you're happy with your tension, make sure you tighten this one back here, also a 13 millimeter, so that you've got this jam nut tight and that one as well. And then these 10 millimeters, these here, and those ones there if you had those undone. Now I'm going to tighten this down real tight. I'm going to use my Knipex pliers wrench on here so I can get a really good angle on it and get this nice and tight into that key. I got that set screw tightened up real well, and I'm just going to reach back here and turn the pulley to make sure everything's moving smoothly. It looks good. It's easy to turn. And then check your chain tension as you're going around to make sure you don't have any exceptionally tight spots. Looks good. Now we can get the cover on. This has to come out to get that cover back on, but then we're going to have to run this spacer back through. So I'll put this through that slotted hole on the cover. So it's like that. And I'm going to get this in place here. Need an extra hand. Not a whole lot I could show you putting that cover on. This is a little tricky here. You can see that this is slotted. There's a little bit of a slot on this side and that side to be able to move this. And so you just have to get it where it's appropriate on your setup. And what I'm doing is I'm looking down here. Well, I'll show you in a second. I'm looking down to make sure that there's no rub between this bottom part, this one bottom part on that thing that goes around that drive shaft. That was rubbing real close to the chain. There was some wear marks on it too, so I'm looking down there to make sure that I don't have that in a spot where it's going to rub. Hopefully you can see that. I'm looking at that, the bottom part of the chain there, the tension side. There's a spot where it gets real close to, I'll try to put an arrow on it, that one plate, that triangle plate that is stuck on the drive shaft part, but it is clearing. I just watched it run around with the flashlight to make sure that it's not touching. If it was touching, I'd have to make some adjustments with that 13 millimeter spacer bolt to just try to get things in just the right spot. These here were those two carriage bolts. The carriage bolts go in from the inside. Then these two were these flange bolts, also 10 millimeter. If you had everything apart, you may have to make these adjustments like me. I have the bucket lifted up and locked out with the implement lockout lever. Then this right here, that bracket that we took off earlier with the rubber bumper on it, you want that gap right there between the top of that rubber and the frame to be about 3/8 of an inch. As you can see, I need to make an adjustment on that. I've already adjusted it a fair amount, but the way you adjust it is with the 14 millimeter on that right there. That's that yoke stirrup, whatever you want to call it, that we put on earlier. So you want to loosen that jam nut so that you can turn that bolt. And then that'll bring this side up. Then once you have this pretty close to 3/8 of an inch, you want to put a level up here on the top, and you want to level it by going over and doing the same thing on the other stirrup right there. So loosen that jam nut and then another 14 millimeter on the bottom to get the thing level. It's a lot of back and forth, but I got it pretty close there. So once you have that and you're satisfied with the leveling, get back in here and just tighten up the jam nuts on either side, and those are 14 millimeter. I made my adjustments to the shoes, and what I did is I just let the scraper, didn't lock it out, but just let the scraper rest on top of this 1/8 inch bar, and then let the shoes fall on each side and tighten down those 13 millimeter fasteners. And I'll take the flashlight and move it behind the housing to make sure that I have a good, even gap. And it looks good. Putting the hardware back in here for the chute, and remember there was one of those plastic washers that went there. That's a square hole. I didn't notice that when I took it apart, but obviously this used to have carriage bolts. But at some point somebody went in and changed it, and this is a John Deere bolt there. But they went with this, so this is how it was on mine. It was washer, and then there was a wavy blocking washer, plastic, and then this is a lock nut. You can see the shape there. Just a smaller version of that one that we had, of the 18 millimeter. I'll put it back with the washers in this same way, but I am going to get some carriage bolts to have a carriage bolt going this way. That makes more sense. So whatever you're using, this side of the bolt is always going to be in that area, so it's just got the regular steel washer. They've got the plastic washer in here, I guess, to protect the paint, and then the plastic washer here, since this could possibly move any of these other places. I think we usually have it about there. So I've already got that one in the middle, and then the other plastic one, and then the lock nut. And I'll get these tightened down. Now the chute, John Deere recommends to grease the chute. I'm just going to use the same grease that I use to grease all the other parts on this snowblower, because it's got a pretty nice consistency when it's cold, and I think this will work. Now the chute, that's how these little plates go. So you can have the screws, the bolts going in through the top, the little thin plate first, and then that plate. And as far as I know, you can only put one on at first to get it lined up, and then the others you gotta put them on when it's already in place. So I'll just kind of put this on. You can see I forgot to, where did it go? It's in the front. I forgot to paint the bottom of this chute, so I'll have to do that in the spring. But if I get the one on, let's see. Okay, now I can get another one on. This is what you're going for. See how that fits together there? You can see I haven't got the nut fastened all the way. I leave them all a little loose until I have all three of them on, and then I fasten them down. Keep those plates together like that, the larger one on the bottom. And it's gonna, the idea is that it pushes under, so the shorter plate rides up against the side, and then the other one secures the chute because it's past that lip. You should have 3 sets of that hardware. There, and one there. If you remove this bracket like I did, you'll have to make a little adjustment when you put it back to seat this onto the track. So there'll be a particular spot where it will bind. Just find that and then make the adjustments. This is a slotted hole. There's a carriage bolt there. On the bottom is a very difficult to reach 13 millimeter nut. I could only get on that with a open end 13 millimeter wrench. And I used a stubby since there isn't a ton of room there. You can remove these shear bolts. This is just the shear bolts, extra shear bolt storage area. You can remove those if you need a little bit more room for your wrench. Then once you have it where you like it, put a little bit of that MP grease on here too. Let's see how the chute looks. Now I'm going to tension the belt using the procedure outlined in the owner's manual. Check the pin comment for a link to that. Here's what the belt looks like now. It's got to be tightened up a bit, and so according to the owner's manual, the first step is to loosen this. This is a 14 millimeter, and I've already loosened it. You can see that'll probably be okay, maybe a little bit more. Then the second step is to loosen this here, and this is a 1/2 inch. I've already got that loosened. And then to tension it, if you need to add tension, you're going to turn this also a 1/2 inch clockwise. And the goal, it says, is to get this, let's see if you can see that hopefully. This part of the arm should be parallel with this part of the frame. So I got a fair bit of tensioning to do here. I know that's probably a little bit hard to see. I had to do a fair amount of turning. This is an old belt. This belt hasn't been replaced in probably 20 years, so it's probably pretty well stretched out. But that there is now parallel with that. If I just kind of use this as a guide, you can see if I put it over here, I'm running into that. So with that as our line, this is parallel with that. So I guess I'll leave it here. As far as the tautness of the belt, it's quite taut. Quite taut, and up here on the sheave, it's pretty taut too. So once you've got your correct tension, I'm gonna lock out this and tighten up this one so that doesn't move, and then just go back and retighten this. All right, and I think that ought to do it. So that is a wrap on this John Deere Snowblower, Snowthrower repair. It's starting to snow a little bit now, but it hasn't snowed in a couple weeks. However, it's been a long time since I shot this video. It's taken me a long time to get it edited and up, but she's probably been out for 10 or 12 hours worth of snow plowing since the rebuild, and everything is working good, looking good. We got a lot of snow this past January, so she got a lot of work. This here is the amount of wear that I've got so far on the flapper modification, and I really do like that. That combined with the back panel, back plate addition. I'm not so concerned about throwing the snow. My main thing is the amount of how often this would just get jammed, and you got to stop, you got to clear it. It hasn't jammed once in all of those hours. It hasn't jammed once since this flapper modification. So that difference really does help propel the snow out in such a way that even when you get that heavy snow, you're not getting all clogged up there. So that alone was worth it. Vibration is taken care of now with the I think it was primarily those welds that was causing the vibration, but obviously she's got new bearings on too, so that'll help. Overall, I'm really happy with this repair. I hope this video was helpful for you too. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your repair.